it tickled me somehow that I said I was angry at you, Marvin, and then I was angry at you for being abstract and not responding to Rosa in a personal way. And then everybody not everybody, but so many people in the meeting so appreciated what you had said about structure that it was a real turning point in the meeting. And I thought it was interesting also that I said that you were the only one that I would say that to in that particular way. I'm angry at you.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I hear your feelings toward me. I took them positively because I felt remiss. I felt badly that I hadn't said something empathically to Rosa, and this was the third time she apologized, and obviously she didn't get any reaction from anybody.
How benign Lynn's anger turned out to be. I mean, with the interaction, because I find it so hard and scary if I'm angry to say it in a way that isn't hurtful, and I often don't say it then, and I feel bad about that. So it was really great to witness something that, it felt like you were closer, actually, Marvin and Lynn. And what makes anger benign, I guess, or how do we get to a point so we can express it in a way that the other person can hear it and not, feel, whoa, I did something wrong.
Feeling. I think of how Rosa, you sort of made the term uncontainable. That was how I was feeling. That this feeling in my body was uncontainable. Like I wanted to burst out and say to Marvin, "Wait a minute, what about Rosa?"
I think
Thank you for that question.
I think if we can voice anger about a particular situation without attacking the person, the person themselves, just to speak to what it is we're upset about without doing an attack on the person makes a huge difference.
I don't think that, we don't know, it's always a risk to express anger because we don't know, we might say it in a way that it's not hurtful, but we don't know how the other person is going to perceive it. We just don't know.
I think it's different when you're saying you're angry when you're standing up for someone else versus when it's like, hey, I'm angry because you did this to me.
Oh, wow. That's it. That touches me because that's true. It feels much easier to say I'm angry that you neglected Rosa than if I said I'm angry because you didn't pay attention to what I said or reflect what I said. And it's so much harder to express the upset or the anger or the hurt when you feel unseen or unnoticed or
Yeah, I think anger is a word and an emotion that we have so many feelings about, and I think it's an emotion we all experience, but one that there's some kind of social shame around feeling angry. I think anger is a word and an emotion that we have so many feelings about, And I think it's an emotion we all experience, but one that there's some kind of social shame around feeling angry. And you shouldn't be angry, or deal with your anger, or things like that. And I just think it's such a natural human emotion, and I think we, generally speaking, have a hard time letting people know that we're angry in a way that they can hear it, or it can come across in a way that it's how something lands on us, not always what the other person is doing, but how it lands. And I think then there's always a real opportunity for openness and sharing about it, if we can sort of come from that place,
And I mean, it's real clear to me that when you're angry, the fire is there, the passion is there. And my sense around that is that Jean's suggestion is the most powerful one, even if it just simply makes you pause for a few moments before you make the expression. For me, that's helpful, because I have a very short trigger and I can get angry very quickly. But I've learned that, pausing, taking a breath, and then having the courage to go in and say, what is this about really? Before I start screaming at the evening news on the television.
It's really a very important topic. So I don't know. I think about it all the time. So the different cultures also express anger differently.
Yes.
American culture, I mean, the mainstream American culture, I mean, it's the anger can be put out there easily, confronting, being upset, fighting for your rights, not letting others step on you, speak out, but other cultures you're not raised that way.
I think the different cultures is important, but different families as well. What we grow up with can make a big difference on how we experience, how frightened we are of anger, our own and anybody else's. Because it can be scary if somebody's out of control.
I notice how we're using the word anger. Who was it that said, I think it was Annette said, what does the word anger mean? And I was saying it, for me, it's frustration, annoyance, irritation. All those things are in this bucket that we're calling anger. But that same bucket has violence, rage, destructiveness, retaliation. I mean, there's a lot in that bucket.
Yeah, I think there's also something like, at least for me, like something like, which is kind of like a more superficial anger, like a quick and superficial anger, and then there's also like a very deep anger, which is a very different quality and has a very different weight, I think. Different, yeah. It's almost a different thing.
Almost a different thing, yes.
It's a lot. I have a climate, I would call it climate rage these days, that comes in waves. And yeah, it's not superficial at all. It's like, so it's grief, it's climate anxiety, it's climate grief and rage. And there's something that's bubbling up now about the paradox of the stuff I'm most angry about is the stuff I maybe least speak about.
I'm afraid of anger. I was not allowed to express my anger when I was a child, so I'm afraid of anger. And when I'm angry at something or at someone, it would develop in a way I end up being angry at myself.
You turned the anger around to yourself. Not fair.
Not fair, but it happens.
I really liked what you said about, when you feel angry and not being sure what to do about it and how you turn it against yourself. And I think that's like Lynn said, such a common thing that we can do, and, I can do that myself sometimes. And I just really, I can make myself wrong for feeling anger, or I can do something for myself, to myself that's not good for myself, like, eating a big chocolate bar when I know it's going to bother my stomach or something like that.
But essentially, when I open myself up to what is under my anger, normally I encounter the parts of myself that I'm really not comfortable with, the parts that, have been traumatized when I was 5 or 6. And it's deep stuff within me that controls or influences, in most cases, unconsciously, how I feel and move, So yeah, I mean, and it's not always comfortable to go in and be with what is there and say, after we say, the F word, okay, I've said it, but what's underneath that? What's underneath that? And there's going to be, I would think, a multitude of
Whatever little thing
parts.
that does.
I sort of felt that Annette did do what you were talking about, Joe. I mean, that she started with anger, but then when she went underneath, she found that desperation and frustration. And I wish probably Joe has notes on those words, those fire engine words. But that whole thing was, it's sort of like anger is the pond, the what we would call the pond, and then underneath is all of this, including a love of the earth and feeling that something that maybe other people don't know so well, since you've studied this, and alarm and urgent. I mean, there was so much in that.
And it seems to me like anger is a really big, important topic in a way, between us focusing human beings who are willing to deal with this stuff. It feels like having a different appreciation or a different way forward with anger would make the difference. For me, how I feel about climate change, not having grandchildren, other people's grandchildren, the environment,